Elizabeth. It's really nice to be with you at this Global Financial Services Tax Leaders meeting in Rome. It's a beautiful location, and thanks for having such a great response from our clients for being here. I want to take this time to talk about some of the current trends and get your perspective as you're talking to clients as part of a conference here. So thanks so much for making the time, and perhaps you can say a few words and we can get cracking.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you, Puneet. It's great to be here, and it's even better to be connecting with colleagues that you don't see that often in person and clients globally. And I think we have almost over 250 clients and colleagues here, so it's fantastic to see everyone here in Rome.
Wonderful. Well done with arranging the conference. So, one of the questions I wanted to get your perspective on is, as you were putting this conference together, there's a lot going on in our industry. What were the key themes that you focused on to bring into and arrange the conference around those?
So there are a number of factors that came together. Obviously everyone's aware of what's going on at a geopolitical economic level, and that combined with what we're seeing on the technological front. So I wanted those factors played into sort of how we deliver the conference and how we position some of the panel discussions. I've been quite interested in terms of my client discussions about the theme of FS convergence. So, historically we would have been quite focused on either banking or insurance or asset management in silos, but actually we've been seeing more and more that that's all disappearing, and all of my clients are pretty much operating across all of those subsectors. So how do we bring that into play? And then PwC had obviously published the thought leadership around value in motion. So not only just FS convergence, but actually convergence of financial services across industries. And I think if you're in financial services, that's not really news, because we always think that financial services sits at the very heart of every other industry because we fund, invest and insure it. But I think the rest of PwC seems to have picked up on that theme. And then we've had a number of global reports that have come out. So we've had a global transparency report, reframing tax, the CEO survey, the global disputes report, and thinking about how we could help our clients navigate that. So standing back, I wanted to sort of step away from the deep technical dives, because in prior years, and rightly so, we've had a lot of deep technical discussions around Pillar 2, for example, but actually taking it up a lens to say, okay, well, what does that mean if I'm a head of tax? How do I navigate all the different regional perspectives? How do I navigate, we're seeing simplification now, globalization was a term used this morning. So, what does that mean in terms of where I allocate resources, how I partner with the business, and how I position tax to add value more? And so I wanted to sort of frame the conference almost in 3 levels. So this morning was all about those trends and having a really great panel discussion, or number of panel discussions on those. And then having a session with the heads of tax to say, okay, I've heard all this content this morning about everything that's going on. How do I translate that into what it means for my team, and then how I interact with my stakeholders and the C-suite? And then the breakout sessions really mean to be the sort of almost under the next level down. So what can I do practically? What tools and solutions and strategies should I take away to free up capacity? What investment decisions should I make, etc. So that was my thinking around the conference.
Yeah, that's very comprehensive, and I think it's resonating. And just on the panel that we had earlier with the tax directors and how their roles are changing. Yep. So can you talk a bit more around, in this landscape, a lot of uncertainty, geopolitical tension, unprecedented levels of changes that are being brought through with the governments, not only in direct taxes but across. What is the 1 or 2 things that you take away in terms of how our clients are thinking of those roles differently?
I think the first one would link into some of the points I made in my plenary this morning about having the right skills, the right technology and ways of working. And I think all of the panelists were very considered about how they were approaching that. So they talked about managing talent and how talent retention was very critical to them. And part of that was actually more about developing skills and ensuring that people had broad roles. There is very much a focus on the last point, ways of working. So how do you demonstrate value to the business, and how do you actually set up or rejig your tax department to ensure that that is happening? And it was quite interesting that one of the panelists who previously had got pressure from other parts of the business about the size of the tax team, now that that tax team was really demonstrating value to the business, those questions had fallen away, which speaks for itself. And then another panellist was quite concerned, well, focused is probably a better word, on the sort of technology piece and thinking about the sheer volume of the number of entities, and I think the number is over 1,000. How do they actually use Gen AI and tech and develop those skills in people so that they can manage more effectively and then focus on value add? So they were probably the three themes, which really resonated actually with what we'd said in our reframing tax survey.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the things they also said is, in order to do more with the existing team, they want to drive more standardization, and the more customized products that are, it makes it harder. That was one of the themes that came through, which brings me to one of the things that I've been spending a lot of time, and I know you do as well, is the retailization of funds. That's a whole different sort of area to go with, and correct, you can get some level of standardization, but for most of the asset managers in particular working with some of the multi-strategy shops, that is a whole separate lift. How do you see that play out, and what do you think it means for our industry?
So I don't think I have a client that is not looking at retailization platforms, both in the US, but also UK and Europe. And it's interesting you're seeing the different perspectives. So I have some clients who are very much at the sort of traditional long-only CCAV type space. And what they're grappling with is, well, how do they understand the private capital piece down below, or the real estate, the private credit, private equity, etc., and the building blocks that make up those fund structures and how they intersect. But then conversely, you've got a lot of private credit, private equity, etc., who aren't familiar with the top part of the structure and how it comes together. And one of the partners has just described it in a session as, if you're a traditional private equity, private credit fund manager, then you design a product which is a bit like an aeroplane. Everyone comes on at once, you fly the plane, everyone gets off at once when the fund life comes to its end. But actually, if you're at the top half of the structure and you're into sort of UCITS and CCAVs, etc., it's more like a bus. People come on and off. So how do you combine the two in the middle? And it's causing quite a lot of complexity. And we actually spend a lot of our time on multi-party calls, which goes back to some of the points I made this morning about having conversations which bring in all of the business functions, because we've had finance, we've had ops, we've had distribution, marketing, legal, tax, all trying to understand how this structure comes together and what trade-offs they might need to make. Because I guess if you're in the traditional private debt or private credit space, private equity space, you might be wanting to sort of maximise some of your SPVs and structuring to minimise withholding tax and get the best CGT rates on exit, etc. But then at the top, you've got complex reporting requirements, and it may be that you have to say, well, yeah, I'm going to put a blocker entity in and I may not get my optimal tax result, but I'm going to have cheaper reporting. So it's understanding some of those nuances, which is where a lot of the conversations are.
Thank you for your time, and I'm also very excited with all these developments and the role of private capital that will play in our industry, and where, as you said, the financial services industry has its tentacles everywhere else. So excited to be with you here.
Thank
you,
and
thank
Puneet.
you for hosting such a wonderful conference.
Pleasure, thank you.